Yes, the entire known media universe is buzzing about the following amazing radio phenomenon.
It's the Bill of May. It's the Bill of May. It's the Bill of May Show.
Well, because they're not ready for it. They indicted a case prematurely against people that they thought would never show up from Russia. And then one of the Russian companies hired lawyers and sent them to court to say, we're here and we want to plead not guilty and we want a lot of discovery on your criminal case against us. And Mr. Mueller's people objected strenuously. They said, we're not ready for an arraignment. They're not here properly. And the federal judge said to them, Mr. Mueller, you indicted this case. It's your case. It's going to trial. Let's start this process right now.
Wait,
and let's
so
give
you're
discovery.
saying that he indicted people without being ready to prove they were guilty?
That is exactly right. He abused the grand jury process, as he has from the beginning of this outrageous investigation authorized by Mr. Rosenstein. This is Rosenstein's monster in spades. Well, because they're not ready.
Yes, it is. It really is. And all this story just it gets smellier and smellier and smellier. We now have what is an obvious conflict of interest between Mueller and a Russian oligarch. Who would have thought? You know, really, when you think about it, the only Russians involved in any of this happen to be the people who are trying to set Donald Trump up. Has nothing to do with the election. Anyway, we're trying to break it down for you. I mean, this is really quite amazing stuff. And what that gentleman was saying is also true, as the lawyers are trying to get the information Mueller supposedly has on these Russians, which, of course, he doesn't have. There was no collusion. We all know that now, don't we? Yes, we do. It's Tuesday. It's May 15th, 2018. The Nobel Peace Prize. I remember when Barack Obama got it. It was a very, very happy day for a lot of people throughout the world. No one really understands how or why he got it. Well, we know how he got it, but why did he get it? He was black, and he had some really great speeches, evidently. Now that Donald Trump is being mentioned, and by the way, who was the first person to even bring up the possibility that Donald Trump should be given the Nobel Peace Prize? It was the leader of the one country on planet Earth that was probably the most vulnerable to be attacked by nuclear weapons. You know what that country is? Well, we'll tell you about it if you want to hang around. Wow, this is the state of journalism. I had no idea you can make a little extra bucks on the side. Evidently, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, folks like that are paying extra money to reporters at some of the major print publications as they break stories, specifically negative stories about Donald Trump. Some of these reporters, and by the way, in Washington, D.C., you're making about 80 grand if you happen to be a reporter. Average salary is about $44,000. So when I tell you you can make another $30,000 to $50,000 just to not talk to any other network, just us, and as high as $250,000 if you got some real good, juicy, negative Donald Trump stuff, it's pretty amazing. Don't you think that would incentivize reporters in digging up only dirt on Donald Trump and not actually presenting the news as it is in reality? And Robert Mueller. Man, where do you start on this? I mean, the last couple of days, it's just been overwhelming, the amount of information that has come out. And none of it is good for the Democrats or the investigation, because all of it, as we knew right from the get-go, is fake. It's manufactured. And it is now becoming quite apparent. Robert Mueller, it seems, has had a relationship with a Russian oligarch. And it goes way back to 2009, where he convinced this gentleman to spend $25 million to get a retired FBI agent. He was in the loop on that, and then they met again. It is an amazing story, along with what's happening with the court cases with Manafort, who will come into play here in just a minute, and this Russian oligarch, and Robert Mueller. And of course, the companies that are actually fighting Mueller, Russian companies. I think one didn't even exist. He actually indicted a company that didn't even exist. This is how awful it is. Now, there was a reputation about Robert Mueller. You may have heard this early on, and a lot of people said, this is just a bunch of people trashing him, trying to discredit him. But Robert Mueller isn't known for being a real sharp prosecutor. He has a rather long history, and it seems as though that might become quite apparent to everyone here very, very soon. Well, it's been over a year. It's been, 14 months Robert Mueller, the investigation, I don't know how much money, hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of people working on this special investigation to uncover the dirt between Donald Trump and the Russians, how they alone overthrew the election. Well, what evidence does he have thus far? Let's look.
The Mueller investigation has been an unmitigated disaster. If the media were covering the Mueller investigation the way it was covering the Trump presidency, I think we'd all agree it hasn't worked. It's failing. It was created based on an illegal leak by James Comey. Many of the people who inspired the Mueller investigation were fired from the government. Sally Yates, the acting attorney general, Andrew McCabe, the deputy AG, James Comey, the FBI director, Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director, all three fired for misconduct. They helped get the Mueller investigation rolling. You have the Clinton DNC dossier that was hidden from the American people being used evidently by Mueller. We have the Flynn investigation under attack because of the corrupt way in which it was initiated and investigated by the FBI, where they said he lied when evidently he didn't. And on top of that, we've got a federal judge questioning the ultimate authority of Mr. Mueller. And we still don't know what his authority is a year out, because he's evidently had secret conversations with the Justice Department about what his authority is. And on top of it, the Russia investigation, the key aspect of it, the Russia troll indictment, it's now being turned into an opportunity for the Russia intelligence operations to go into a federal court and demand evidence from Mr. Mueller about what they have on Russia intelligence operations, namely intervention in our elections. What a disaster for the rule of law. And frankly, the president has been victimized through all of this, because evidently there's nothing to justify an investigation of him requiring Justice Department resources and authorities the way that's been misused to date.
Oh, you can't make this stuff up. The president of the Judicial Watch there, I know it's a conservative organization, but they deal in the law, and they have been very, very good at actually getting documents that Congress could not get, because they have different abilities, more abilities, quite honestly, by using the judicial process in order to get those documents. And so they have exposed an awful lot of this themselves. So he is certainly an expert, and I know for Democrats and liberals who are still in the belief cycle that this actually happened, and there are many of them out there, that is probably not going to be believed, and they'll use, well, he's a conservative from a conservative organization, to denounce it. But the facts that he states are absolutely true, absolutely true. Just imagine, here we sit today, where the Democratic Party initially started this because Hillary Clinton lost in a big, big way. That's where it began. The very that evening, the whole Russian collusion story began in order to cover up the loss, and then, of course, many other things that they had been doing in the Obama White House. That's where it began. And when you look at it, there isn't a single domestic intelligence source in any of this. It's Hillary Clinton's campaign hiring a British ex-spy to use Russian spies or unnamed sources in Russia to create a false dossier that Comey, who was fired, took, along with others. McCabe, he was fired too. And then you got Loretta Lynch involved in this. And then they went to the FISA to get the opportunity to literally spy on the Donald Trump campaign. And now there's a fact, the stories are out there that they actually had a mole in there, which would be bigger than Watergate, my friends, bigger than Watergate. But here we are a year later, and what we have is we have the Russians using our court system to go after this Mueller, who is nothing more than a guy trying to take down the president of the United States. That's it, and they have nothing. They have nothing. But now they can actually expose some of our secrets by because legally they can ask for this information and be given it. So it'll be interesting to see what Robert Mueller does on just that. Now, let's go back to Manafort. There's so many names here. Manafort, oh, he's an evil guy. He's a bad person. One of the first people Mueller kind of zeroed in on. Let's go back in time and get you up to speed.
But a new investigative report this morning from the Associated Press claims that from 2006 to at least 2009, Manafort secretly worked for a Russian billionaire to advance the interests of Russian President Vladimir Putin and proposed an ambitious political strategy to undermine anti-Russian opposition across former Soviet republics. The report quotes from a 2005 memo that Manafort allegedly wrote to business tycoon Oleg Deripaska, who became one of the wealthiest men in Putin's Russia, and with whom Manafort reportedly signed a $10 million contract in 2006. The AP reports Manafort told Deripaska in 2005 he was pushing policies, quote, at the highest levels of the U.S. government, the White House, Capitol Hill, and the State Department. According to the documents and according to the report, Manafort wrote in his memo, "We are now of the belief that this model can greatly benefit the Putin government if employed at the correct levels with the appropriate commitment to success," end quote. The AP says Manafort did not disclose details about foreign lobbying work to the Justice Department during the period the contract was in place.
Damn him. Wait a second. So he's working with a Russian oligarch, and he just didn't file the proper paperwork. Boy, you know what would be funny is if the FBI, former FBI director, was doing the same thing, wouldn't it? That would be a knee slapper. It really would. Looky here. Looky here. Sit back for a moment. Pretend you're working on your computer at work and see if you can follow this. You have Mueller, who went after Manafort because he's working with this oligarch, and they were in business for themselves. The oligarch doesn't like Manafort at all because he lost about $10 million in that business arrangement. Let's go way back in time to 2009. Now you have Mueller, he's the FBI director. He contacts the same oligarch, this Deripaska, and he says, "Hey, Russian oligarch, we want to get our former FBI informant, who is, where was he, in Iran, I think he was, and he was being held captive. Would you fund an attempt to locate him and get him out?" He talked this guy into funding $25 million worth of his money in order to go after FBI agent Robert Levinson. And it had worked. They had got him out, and according to reports, got him on the tarmac ready to go, and then it was the Clintons' State Department that shut the whole thing down. The whole thing down. Now, this guy lost $25 million, but at the same time, he got special access and privilege. That $25 million, Robert Mueller and the FBI and the Obama administration, they took care of this guy. They did. He had special access and visas. And interestingly enough, it was Donald Trump who put sanctions back on this guy. This evil oligarch that supposedly Manafort was working with, and therefore Russian collusion, is the same one that Obama, his administration, his FBI, and others convinced to spend $25 million to go after this former FBI agent. By the way, they don't know where he is. They don't know where he is to this day. But they screwed this guy out of $25 million, but they gave him special visas and access so that he could come and go in the country. And quite honestly, in a sense, that's illegal, isn't it? So, you got that? You got that so far? So it's interesting. Now Mueller and his Democratic crack team of investigators decide, well, we got to come up with something because we know the whole Russian collusion thing is falling down on us. There's nothing here. There's nothing here. So you know what they do? They call up their old buddy, the oligarch, Deripaska, and they say, "Hey, we know that you and Manafort got in kind of a bad deal. You don't like him, do you? I know you don't like him. You know what? We don't like Trump. We don't like Manafort. We don't like Trump. Let's say we get together." And they did get together. They got together, and the FBI, they said, "Well, you know, here's the deal. It's all just theory right now, but we kind of got this idea that Manafort, the guy you really hate, somehow was taking Russian super secret information and colluding with Russia and passing that on to Donald Trump." You know what Deripaska did? He laughed out loud at them. Laughed out loud at them. Said it was ridiculous. Well, wait a second. He's a Russian oligarch. What else is he supposed to do? He's trying to cover himself, right? He said there was absolutely nothing to it. Manafort is not that high level of a person. It was crazy. But the thing about this now is you have Mueller working with a guy, and remember we were talking about yesterday, we were talking about how they set up Papadopoulos, this nobody guy, and it was the FBI and the way that they set up the spy involvement in this where they fed him information only to later catch him so that they could continue with the investigation. Is this not conflict of interest? Just a little bit of conflict of interest? Maybe I didn't explain it quite as well as I should. Maybe this will do a better job.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the real question is the whole Russia collusion case is, did someone ask a favor of Russia, right? Did Donald Trump collude and try to get a favor? Well, 6 or 7 years before collusion was a twinkle in the public's imagination, the FBI asked a favor of this same oligarch, the oligarch that's now a client and a witness against potentially Paul Manafort, and there's no disclosure. We in the public don't know it. Doesn't appear that the courts know it.
Well, let me ask you, did the FBI and Mueller ever tell Congress that they had asked this oligarch?
Great question. I talked to the Senate and House Intelligence Committee
fund
chairman.
this, by the way. They got the Russian oligarch to pay $25 million. Actually, part of me thinks it's genius. But then don't use the same guy against Manafort and don't mention that you know the guy.
Yeah, I think that's right. I talked to the Senate Intelligence, House Intelligence Committee chairman from that time, Bill Nelson of Florida, Mike Rogers of Michigan. They both said that we were never briefed, and they were surprised to learn that such an operation occurred without Congress being informed.
I'm surprised. Are you surprised anymore? How often have you heard that? How often have you heard Congress is surprised that they weren't informed about this? Probably the entire 8 years President Obama was the commander-in-chief and the CEO of the U.S. government. This kind of stuff should frighten anybody who's watching this program. But nonetheless, we're surprised. We're surprised. You see, the Congress is supposed to be an oversight of the FBI and the branch of the executive branch of these, and they're not. They're not, because they're not being informed. And when I mentioned that Judicial Watch had powers that the Congress actually doesn't have, you see, the Congress can't go to court and subpoena people, but the Judicial Watch can do that, and that's how they got documentation. They got documentation before Congress could get documentation, and it was a game that was being played by Obama and all his little minions in order to cover what they've done in the 8 years, which hopefully at some point we'll get around to discovering. But more importantly, it was to take out and delegitimize this president, who has done a phenomenal job, by the way. So, conflict of interest. This isn't the first time, is it?
Well, and Sean, your show and the great reporting John has done has demonstrated that this is but one conflict of interest. The Mueller probe is an orgy of conflicts of interest, and any one of them taken independently could potentially be brushed aside, but viewed in their totality, it shows how corrupt and biased this investigation is. Also an important point on this oligarch, Deripaska. Senator Tom Cotton asked a question in February as to whether or not Deripaska was involved in the drafting of the dossier with Christopher Steele.
Was he?
And Christopher Wray would not answer that question in open session.
We're going to pull that tape.
So
I didn't
very,
know.
very important that this very oligarch could have had a role in telling lies about Donald Trump, and that we still don't know that as the American people.
All right.
Imagine that now. Is this starting to clear up for you? You have this oligarch that the Mueller and his FBI used in the past. They also used him in the hopes of getting some kind of information that would substantiate this bizarre tale of Russian collusion. He indicted a couple of Russian companies. One didn't legitimately exist at the time, but so what? Somehow, 13 people and $2 million brought down the entire democracy of the United States. That's the case the Democrats and Mueller are trying to make. So they go to this guy and they say, you don't like Manafort, he screwed you out of $10 million. You don't like Trump. Is it possible that this guy also was the source being used by the FBI to add further BS to whatever they needed in order to get the FISA warrants and to further the investigation? I would not be surprised. Not at this point, not at all. Here's a list of conflicts. Check it out.
Well, look, Neil, I think that from the very beginning, Robert Mueller had one major conflict, and that was his relationship with James Comey, who succeeded him at the FBI. And Comey, of course, was very instrumental and said he wanted a special counsel, and that special counsel happened to be Robert Mueller. But I think the events last week, with the funding of the dossier coming into focus, that the Democrats funded it, and the Russian dossier, and the fact that it probably was used used by the Obama White House and the Obama Justice Department, the Obama FBI, as part of its investigation in Donald Trump. Because Robert Mueller worked for the Obama administration, I think that's a major conflict. And then secondly, the Uranium One deal, with the Congress finally getting the gag order lifted on the informant, that would have happened when Mueller was running the FBI. So I think that all of this fits neatly into an idea that this is a conflict that can't be corrected except for resignation.
Well, yes, and that was back then. That was it seems like forever ago, right? That's when we were just talking about the dossier. And of course, they used the dossier to get the FISA warrant. They also know that the dossier will not hold up in court, which is why they weren't entirely truthful to the FISA judge. They have nothing. They have nothing, but they got to find something. We went through that a bit yesterday, and this is where they then started phase two, where they planted information. Whether it's true or not, I don't know if the Russians have Hillary's emails or not. It would be nice if they did, because I bet it's fascinating reading. But they told Papadopoulos that. He's a 24-year-old guy. He's a nobody, as Rush said, just an absolute nobody. And then they fly him to London, and then they hook up with a very high-ranking. It isn't an ambassador of Australia. It's a higher up. I forget what the official title is at this point. But he's a big deal over in London. How does that guy and a nobody end up in a bar drinking, getting drunk, and then they, of course, that's where the information came that, the Russians, they have Hillary's emails. He goes back, and that's how the investigation continued, and they took it from there. By the way, it was a British ambassador that informed John McCain about this dossier. And that's how John McCain got the dossier. When you start to look at this, I don't think there are any Americans involved in this. It's an Australian, it's a British guy, you have an ambassador, you have the British spy, and you have a bunch of Russians feeding information. And including, I guess you could say, some folks in the John Kerry State Department helped out in that matter as well. So, the FBI may have gone to Russia to help prove collusion. And who did they go to?
Yeah, it's great. So he's already been very helpful to the FBI. He spent $25 million of his own money trying to help them rescue one of their captured agents in Iran. So he has their trust. They bring him into the country because he had been banned from coming in by the State Department. They give him 8 or 10 passports to come in. And then it's 2 months before the election. He's asleep in his apartment in New York, and he gets a knock on the door by some of the same FBI agents that worked with him on the earlier operation. They said, "We think Trump's campaign and Russia are colluding on the election." And he lets out a big laugh.
Wait.
Yeah.
The agents say to a Russian billionaire.
Yes, close to Putin.
Supposedly close to Putin.
That's
I mean,
right.
all the billionaires know Putin.
True.
It's like all the billionaires in the United States know Trump, and all the politicians. Like, they always say that's like not a big deal.
Right.
But they say to him, we have an idea or a theory that he's colluding through what, Paul Manafort?
Paul Manafort was the person they mentioned, they thought. And here's the funny part. Oleg Deripaska had a tortured relationship with Paul Manafort. He hired him as a political consultant, wasn't happy with that, gave him some money for an investment. Deripaska sued him. They had a falling out. He said he stole my money, took it into the United States. So the guy they go to is an enemy of Paul Manafort, and they say, well, can you help us prove that maybe Manafort's colluding with Putin to throw the whole election to Donald Trump? And he laughs. He breaks out in laughter, saying it's preposterous. And he said, no, seriously, take this seriously. And no, I'm telling you, it's not true. I don't like the guy. Listen, I'd love to smear him. I'm telling you, there's no chance that Russia is using Paul Manafort to coordinate an election. And that's important for 2 reasons. It's 2 months before the election. It's before the FISA application. And here's someone that the FBI trusted previously to give them reliable information, spend his own money doing FBI work. And now they're telling him no collusion. Does the FISA court know this? I bet not from what we...
No, of course not. In fact, we're just finding out about this. You're beginning to understand. Well, for most of you, you've understood for a very long time. Now you can feel a little bit vindicated as this becomes more unraveling each and every day. The question is, where do we go from here? What's next? And will these individuals be held accountable? Jim Comey has lied. McCabe has lied. Loretta Lynch is lying. You have Brennan, who leaked information. All of this as a, not to sound conspiratorial, but a collusion in the Obama administration. And they say even the White House was well aware of this. So Obama involved in order to take out a legally elected president of the United States. And I am sure it's not because they loved Hillary Clinton. I think it has more to do with what they have done the past 8 years, and they need to hide it in a big way. So it'll be fun when we can get this all behind us and then roll up our sleeves and begin to dig into the last 8 years of the Obama administration. Hopefully some people will end up wearing orange. I think they'd look good in orange. We'll be back. There's more on this. Don't you dare go away.
Yes, the entire known media universe is buzzing about the following amazing radio phenomenon.
It's the Bill of May. It's the Bill of May. It's the Bill of May Show.
Oh, look at that. You see that right there? That is the scariest website in the world, at least for people who have done things wrong. And I mean that because, ladies and gentlemen, Truthfinder is a website that does, well, it does something better than anybody else can do it. It continually reaches out and searches the public records that are ever expanding each and every day, millions upon hundreds of millions of records, in order to give you the most accurate background check you can expect to get. And I'm telling you, you know, it might be just you. You want to find out about yourself. Maybe it's the babysitter. Or maybe you purchase something off of Craigslist. There are an infinite number of reasons why you could use the services of Truthfinder. And we are very honored that Truthfinder is, in fact, a sponsor of this program. And I hope that you'll take it upon yourself to patronize them, because they are absolutely outstanding and wonderful. And the best way to find out for yourself is to try it. And all you need to do is go to bigleaguepolitics.com/truthfinders. bigleaguepolitics.com/truthfinders.
There was a spy, though. What does that mean for Fusion GPS?
Well,
or for Christopher Steele?
Well, I think what it really means, I think it will look badly on the Department of Justice and the FBI on how they conducted this investigation.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. We're trying to put clarity and sunlight for the American people so they know everything that happened on how this investigation began.
It kind of sounds as if your congressional investigators got the information regarding this secret source, it sounds like that might call into question the narrative we've heard so far. It's like, oh, really? It didn't happen like that at all.
Well, I think if if the campaign was somehow set up, I think that would be a problem, right? If there were somehow meetings that occurred and all this was a setup, because we have yet to see any credible evidence or intelligence that led to the opening of this investigation.
By you saying that, it makes it sound like you believe Donald Trump was framed.
Well, look, I believe that they didn't have that. Well, first of all, I believe they never should have opened a counterintelligence investigation into a political party. Counterintelligence investigations are very rarely do they happen, and when they do happen, you have to be very careful, because you're using the tools of our intelligence services and relationships with other countries in order to spy on a political campaign. Probably not a good idea.
Along with the fact that you could be
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. We spoke a little bit about that yesterday. That if in fact the FBI or whomever put a mole in the Trump campaign, that is one. You don't do that, but if you're going to do that, you better have some amazing national security type evidence that would suggest it was needed. And if it turns out that it was even prior to the FISA warrant and the dossier, I'm telling you, this is going to be huge. If you think Watergate, which is something that people use as a reference, Watergate will mean nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is absolutely huge if it's true, so we'll have to wait and see. But a lot of discovery is being made, and it's not just happening on the part of Judicial Watch or Congress and the Senate. A lot of the investigative tools of journalism, we'll get into in a moment, really not firing on all cylinders. But Russia itself is fighting back. You know, and this is the thing about it. You make up this story, whether it's to cover Hillary Clinton and her embarrassing loss to Donald Trump, or to cover Barack Obama and all he's done in his administration, which is, you know, I'm sure likely. You don't use the resources of the United States government in the way that Barack Obama has used it. And the fact that you are also at a time when, you know, we have friends, we have enemies, I think Donald Trump is right. You want to be friends with Russia. They would make more sense to try to do that than to push him away, which of course the Democratic Party is doing. I mean, they loved Russia. I mean, Barack Obama loved Russia. He encouraged Donald Trump and people like him to go do business in Russia. It wasn't until they were about to lose the election that they all of a sudden had this turn on what is, I guess now, the evil empire from their perspective. But these two companies that Mueller indicted are small-time companies, Russian companies, and they hired lawyers and they're fighting back. And they're saying, we're not guilty of anything. We want to know what you said in front of the grand jury, because it is by law, the court may authorize disclosure at a time, in a manner, and subject to any other conditions that it directs of a grand jury matter at the request of a defendant who shows that a ground may exist to dismiss the indictment because of matter that occurred before the grand jury. And that's important because when you take a look at some of the things that have been said and has been exposed, that the law itself says, for instance, there's nothing wrong with a Russian company or Canadian company, an Australian company, whatever company, anywhere in the world to buy ads on Facebook. There is nothing illegal about that. It has to be a willful intent. You have to prove they willfully did it with the hopes of overthrowing the election of the United States of America, which of course is preposterous. There's no one who could possibly make that case that a Russian company spending whatever, $1 million, $2 million on Facebook, and the majority of it after the election, somehow had any impact on a presidential race that approached $3 billion. So that's important. In addition to that, these companies, and I'm assuming the Russian government is probably guiding them in some manner, go find out what the American intelligence has actually discovered. You can do that in a court today. So watch this very carefully. How Mueller reacts to this. He and his staff have already kind of whacked out. I'm sure they did not expect the Russian companies to even show up in court, and now they have to defend something they never planned on defending it. And that tells you all you need to know. All you need to know. Now we have some other issues, and that has to do with the White House. And they have an issue with leaks. Seems like everybody's leaking in America today. It doesn't matter what agency it is. We know that if it's negative towards Donald Trump, it will be leaked. The latest was in the White House, and it had to do with the communications department. And now they're talking about a shakeup. Check this out.
We are getting some indications, though, that there will be some fallout from the leak of what Kelly Sadler, who is the surrogate communications director, said about Senator John McCain in a staff meeting last week. The president tweeting last night, quote, "The so-called leaks coming out of the White House are a massive over-exaggeration put out by the fake news media in order to make us look as bad as possible. With that being said, leakers are traitors and cowards, and we will find out who they are." There was a defined group of people who were in the room that day. It was a rather large group, though, about 30 people. In the initial aftermath of it, Fox found no shortage of people who were willing to drop a dime on Kelly Sadler. But since then, Sarah Huckabee Sanders has decried the leak.
I just find this so childish, so immature. First of all, I got 30 people. 30 people. It's kind of like the teachers union telling me that, well, there's no way to tell which teachers are good and which teachers are bad. If you can't tell which of the 30 people are leaking, then there's a real big issue in regards to how this government is being run by Donald Trump. I'm pretty sure it's a very easy thing to do, to go through the rank of each of those individuals and find out who's doing it. But even more preposterous, listen, it was a bad joke. It was in bad taste. It had to do with John McCain. He's about to die kind of a thing. I'm going, so what? So what? So what? This is not national security, but It does. McCain's the media darling, has been for a very, very long time. And I don't think you can look at what's happening with the leaks, use this one example, because to me it's childish and it's silly. But there's no question there are leaks coming out of the White House, and I don't understand why they continue to this day. Here's Hugo Gordon. He has this to say about the leaks.
Every White House leaks to some extent, some more than others. Bill Clinton's leaked a lot, but George W. Bush and Obama's White Houses were pretty tight. Now you've got a White House that leaks a lot. What's extraordinary about the leaks this time, though, is not so much how many there are, although that's a lot, it's the nature of those leaks. As Kellyanne Conway said, you know, these are done to damage other people. If you think about the leak about what was said about John McCain, it can have no purpose other than to make Kelly Sadler and perhaps the White House and the president look mean-spirited. And, you know, one wonders why somebody like who leaks that sort of thing is actually working in the White House, because they're clearly trying to inflict damage on it.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And that has to stop. There's no question about it. You know, here's a thought, and it's been written by other people, that Donald Trump is unlike any other president that we've had in a very long time, and that he invites opposition voices. He enjoys it. He may even find it entertaining, but he's a business guy. And his style is, you may not agree with him, go at it, and then I'll make the decision. And what you have in the Trump White House is you have globalists, and then you have the populists, nationalists, and they don't agree with one another. And so I think that's good, because what happens in Washington, as you know, is you're told you're awesome, you're great, you're just fantastic, you're the best president ever, and you live in a bubble. I don't think Donald Trump's in a bubble. I just don't get a sense he is, and partly is because of this. But that atmosphere is ripe for this kind of thing. One guy sticking it to another guy, just because they don't like one another. In fact, that's a good question. Do people in the White House actually like one another?
It really is extraordinary. It seems like there are people inside the White House who just don't like each other and are trying to play out some of this palace intrigue in the press. I also think sometimes people leak because they don't like certain policies or where they think certain policies are going. But the bottom line here is if the White House had come out 4 or 5 days ago when the story first broke, if they had apologized for the comment, which I think everyone agrees was pretty offensive, and moved on, we still wouldn't be talking about it today. They have not handled what was a pretty egregious comment and a pretty egregious leak, I think, in the right way in this case.
Yeah, and she's right. Of course, she was a former spokesperson. It was the State Department, I think, under Barack Obama, now a Fox News contributor, and she's right. I don't understand why it takes so long to do what you should do. Some of this is really a no-brainer thing. You had, Sanders go in and read them the Riot Act, and she broke up in tears, and then that was leaked. So you have the head of the department, and you start cleaning house. Start cleaning house and get this under control. And the White House or whomever is in charge of making these kinds of decisions in dealing with it from a PR standpoint, it would have been an easy thing. But let's face it, they could have come out and apologized. It wouldn't have been the great apology, the wrong apology. He should have been fired. The debate would have continued because, ladies and gentlemen, the media hates Donald Trump. Period. He'll get his house in order. And quite honestly, I enjoy the fact that he has these different voices talking at him. I think that makes him a better president. As far as the leaks are concerned, those department heads need to get a handle on it. And where the heck is the Department of Justice on a lot of these leaks as well? In fact, I mentioned the media when we come back. The media, interesting, they're paying reporters extra money, a rather significant amount of extra money to go out, write stories, and then be an exclusive on their network to beat up on Donald Trump. Now that seems like a motivator, doesn't it? What would this reporter be looking for in his daily routine? Good news or bad news? We'll be back.
Plus, the entire known media universe is buzzing about the following amazing radio phenomenon.
It's the Bill LeMay. It's the Bill LeMay. It's the Bill LeMay Show.
Birch Gold. What an awesome company. First of all, they're A+ with the Better Business Bureau. Actually, I found them through word of mouth. And the people that speak on behalf of Birch Gold are platinum. You know what I mean? You can take their word to the bank. And I have nothing but just the highest praise for Birch Gold. You know that they can take your IRA and 401k and turn it into a precious metals IRA. Now, there's no tax penalty for doing this. And what it will do, of course, is it will give you that security, that base that you need. You know, diversification is incredibly important when you're investing money. You know this. You may not know a lot about precious metals. I certainly didn't. And right now they have a 16-page booklet that's just full of exclusive information that you can only get from Birch Gold. And it will open your eyes. And I think it will also tell you what I'm telling you. You'll feel it inside you that Birch Gold is the place to go. And they are educators. And the personalized service, I think, is the one thing I really like. When you've dealt with precious metal and investing in that, there are people who just want to sell you stuff. That's not what Birch Gold is all about. So give them a try. Get the 16-page booklet. It's absolutely free. You have nothing to lose, no obligation. You go to bigleaguepolitics.com/birchgold. bigleaguepolitics.com/birchgold.
Gaza border, an awful scene unfolding. Tens of thousands of Palestinians, some waving their flags, the flags of a people without a country, a human tide of protest.
The protesters, including 6 children who were reportedly killed today, seem to be losing their lives for nothing.
All of those babies are dead. All of those people are dead. They're dead.
Yes, they are. And who are the networks blaming? You got it, Donald Trump and Israel. We've had this shift in the United States, and it's happened over my lifetime. I've seen it where we were very pro-Israel, and then you've had your elite progressive colleges and the individual professors and their belief system changed all of that. And now it is amazing to me that the progressive elite, which predominantly is our journalists today in Hollywood and Democratic Party, have a much different perspective of Israel and one of the Palestinians. As though anybody ever reads history anymore and understands what's going on there, that doesn't matter. What you have here, and you can take a look at the CBS Morning News, the ABC Morning News, NBC, it doesn't matter. They were all focusing on that violence, and of course they were blaming none other than Donald Trump and his outrageous move to bring the U.S. Embassy to the capital city of Israel, which would have been, of course, Jerusalem. You have to understand that what went down there was a protest where they were warned not to approach the wall. They had bombs. They had other explosive devices in hopes of breaching the wall. You had Hamas using women and children as they do as shields. Why can't our media see it for what it is? Instead, they report what they report. And I'm telling you, it was outrageous out in front, and I'm just stunned by it. The New York Times accuses, it's the New York Times. Are they going to be anti-Israel, anti-U.S. American-Israeli relationship? You bet they are. Watch.
Critics slamming the New York Times for this piece yesterday at the height of deadly clashes on the Gaza border with Israel. The headline reading, Israel kills 58 and injures over 1,300 by gunfire at Gaza border. But the article failed to mention the Hamas militants disguised as protesters who Israel blames for firing up tensions until the 42nd paragraph of its main story last night.
Yeah, well, that's the New York Times, and that's why we have the issues we have in America today. We have a very poorly educated populace, one that doesn't really pay attention to the news, even this kind of news. You know, when you think about it, you get over in all the press in the United States. If you're given Google, Facebook, I could go on. There's a very limited amount of places you can go. If you're somebody who's looking for factual information, I'm not even talking about conservative or liberal, somebody looking for factual information, where do you go today? It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to actually get the real news. So they all went crazy, they all went nuts, as was predicted they would do. and they will eventually be wrong. But is it possible, just possible, that the Palestinians may have taken advantage of all the media coverage on the day the U.S. Embassy opened in Jerusalem?
You know, this is a problem for journalism that goes beyond the New York Times. Yes, we can debate the level of the Israeli response. Yes, we can debate the role of President Trump's decision to move the embassy. But this was a confrontation that was orchestrated by Hamas, knowing full well there would be casualties for propaganda purposes. And here's what's often either left out or minimized in the coverage, Sandra. For example, Hamas sent some women toward the fence knowing they would make more sympathetic victims. For example, these supposedly unarmed protesters, some of them had explosives and incendiary kites and burning tires to attack the Israeli side. And also that Israel had dropped leaflets in the area warning the Palestinians to stay away from the fence. But Hamas, again, wanted this confrontation.
You're not going to get any of that on the news. And even so, these are poor people. They've been abused. They're slaves to Israel. No one remembers the aggressive war that took place against Israel back in the day and why Gaza exists and all of that. Ben Shapiro, wait, I know, he's a never-Trumper, but he made a very, very good point.
No, I mean, I think that there's so many media outlets that are acting as propaganda arms for Hamas that it's actually quite incredible. Hamas has not been unclear about their intent here. They've been saying for weeks they want to send literally 100,000 people to storm the border with Israel. Hamas has been obvious. They say we want to break in, we want to kill Israelis. They're not hiding the ball here, and the media are hiding the ball. The media are playing propaganda wing for a terrorist group, which has made clear their intent. There are people who are storming the border, attempting to kill Israeli soldiers, sending kites with incendiary devices over the border, flinging Molotov cocktails at people who are manning the border, flinging stones at people manning the border. Right. And the Israelis are acting with their usual restraint, and the media are treating this as though Israelis are in indiscriminate fashion killing civilians. It's just a lie, but the media have been doing that for years. Yes,
it is a lie. Do you understand that? NBC lying to you. ABC, CBS lying to you. Purposely lying to you. Why? Why would they lie to you?
I mean, the answer is that they would prefer the Israelis stop existing, because these are the two choices. It's not that Hamas is not in control of the Gaza Strip. You heard one of the people in that montage say that these are people without a state. Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2005. Okay, the Gaza Strip has been entirely under the control of Hamas since 2006, when the Palestinians elected Hamas in an overwhelming majority. Hamas is a State Department designated terrorist group and one of the worst terrorist groups on the planet, and yet we're supposed to believe that this is Israel's fault, that Hamas is trying to storm the border. It's beyond all definition, and the attempt to link it, by the way, with the Jerusalem embassy opening is just insane. This has been going on for weeks. It's just the media haven't wanted to cover it, and they would prefer to blame President Trump for Hamas trumped-up violence than to actually lay the blame at the feet of the people who are creating it.
Yeah, but that's very typical of all progressive/liberal individuals, particularly in the media. So they would rather blame the President of the United States for something he had absolutely nothing to do with because of their hate. It is so deep, so intense, it blinds them to reality, which is unfortunate because what's taking place there and elsewhere around the world, very important and deserves to be honestly told. You just are not going to get it here in America today. For instance, you had Ivanka Trump, and she unfolded took the sheet down and unveiled the Jerusalem plaque. Check this out, the Daily News. Daddy's little ghoul. 55 slaughtered in Gaza, but Ivanka all smiles at Jerusalem embassy unveiled. I mean, what kind of, first of all, IQ do you have to believe that? And what kind of hate do you have to have inside? And I know, I'm not going to talk about the hypocrisy and the double standards. They exist, they are what they are. There's a mental illness in America today, well, in the world today. It's called progressivism. Liberals are losing their mind. They are a group of individuals who are nice enough people, but don't believe in facts, don't want to hear facts. They're a very arrogant, narcissistic group of individuals who believe it's their way or no way. And it's unfortunate because they always fail. There is nothing a progressive policy has ever accomplished. It has only ended up hurting the very people that they directed it to and overall the country as a whole. And they continue to make a lot of noise. Unfortunately, we've been asleep at the wheel. The greatest thing we could do in America today is get conservatives into the public education system. If we're not going to blow it up, If we're not going to create a free market system, then get conservatives in our universities. And you know what? States all across America, it's your tax dollars supporting these universities. You can and should dictate that a certain percentage of the faculty be of a conservative nature. Right now, you'd be hard-pressed to find many conservatives at any major university in America today. Yeah. And then you got Stormy's lawyer. Talk about them. Stormy's lawyer, who has been given the credibility. I saw a figure, $175 million in free advertising by these same networks, which are nothing more than a propaganda arm now to take down Donald Trump. So they love this guy. You remember this when he came on and put this guarantee out there?
As of this morning, we have NBC News that has independently verified what we said. We have the New York Times who's independently verified what is contained within the document. And I think there's 2 or 3 other independent news organizations that have confirmed the veracity of what we set forth in our summary document that we issued yesterday. So we stand behind what we put in the document. It's 100% accurate, and that's that.
Yeah. That's that. Well, thank you for being here. Remember, we played you that montage. Amazing stuff. But who's this guy? Who's this dude? Who is he to give me a 100% guarantee that this is accurate? And where do you get this information? Treasury Department is starting to look into that as well. Seriously, who is this man? And when the Daily Caller went ahead and took a look at this, and he has got a remarkable background. But after the 100% guarantee, at least he had the integrity to say, gosh, I was wrong. Right?
Well, out of $3 million identified in our executive summary, all but about $25,000 has checked out and been verified, in fact, by the companies involved in many instances. I think your network has verified a lot of it. So, you know, it's basically 99.35% or thereabouts correct. I mean, I think that's a pretty high percentage. I'd take that percentage on any exam I've ever taken in my life.
Yeah, except the companies they talked to all said we didn't get anything in return. They hired him as a political consultant. Think of Cohen as Clinton Foundation light. He was trying to say, hey, I know Donald Trump, I'm his attorney. I might take him on, give me some money, maybe I can get his ear. That's been going on for a long time. And unfortunately, he is making it into something that is not. But this guy is a guy that has gotten involved with a lot of people. He's left them hanging. He's bankruptcies. He's owes millions of dollars in taxes. And the Daily Caller had a great piece on it. In fact, you can go to the Facebook page and read it for yourself. And this guy is not a good guy. And anybody who's ever worked with him, and now a lot of people won't work for him, is a very arrogant, media-seeking kind of hound who has a very tarnished background, certainly one that would make any reputable network go, you know what? I'm not so sure he should be on 24/7 because I'm not so sure this guy is a straight shooter. Well, that upset this gentleman. In fact, he has threatened to do something.
Pushing you. Look, here's what I'm going to say, Don. All right, if people want to argue about the facts and the evidence relating to this case, great. They want to argue about the legal issues relating to the cases, fantastic. But let me tell you what's not appropriate. What's not appropriate is to engage in character assassination attempts aimed at either me or my client or our families because you don't like the facts and the evidence in the underlying cases and you don't know how to address it. So what you try to do is you try to create diversions by mucking up the record and by bringing up all kinds of nonsense about our personal histories or our families, etc. That has no place in any of this whatsoever. It's no different. You don't hear me making personal attacks on the President of the United States relating to issues unrelated to this. You don't hear me making personal attacks about Michael Cohen relating to other aspects of his life that don't have anything to do with this.
Oh, I see. Well, but this has something to do with it. Who you are makes sense. And by the way, this information that they have on you is all public records. I'm not sure where you got his bank records. So he is, you look under a rock, you'll find him. All right? He's there. That's where he lives. And I think it's despicable that the networks haven't done any kind of background on him to find out what kind of individual this guy is. And now there's also news that Stormy looked the other way while one of her actresses was sexually assaulted on the set. So I'm not sure she's all in it just because she feels violated. These two individuals are individuals that are out for one thing, and it's money, fame, and fortune. And I don't know. Maybe this is her 5, which seems like more like an hour of fame, but I think they'll fade into the past. All right, we're going to wrap it up with our video of the day. That's coming up next. And that's good because this is a show that has a lot of dots that need to be connected. And I have no doubt that tomorrow there's going to be more on this. And it just seems as though the Democratic Party at some point is going to have to answer to all of this because they have been stating unequivocally that the fact is the Russians took down the election and Donald Trump is responsible for that. It doesn't appear that any of that is even remotely true. Back with the video. Stick around.
Yes, the entire known media universe is buzzing about the following amazing radio phenomenon.
It's the Bill LeMay. It's the Bill LeMay. It's the Bill LeMay Show.
Well, good news. Trump's nominee for CIA director. Looks like she has the votes to move through. Haspel is her name. And of course, you may have recalled that the Democrats found morality or something as they questioned her rather brutally on morality and interrogation techniques. And it's interesting, at a time of war versus a time of peace, and hindsight being 2020, it's an absurd position to take, but people are easily fooled today. So we had a Marine. Was it Steve Kelly?
Tim Kennedy.
Tim
Kennedy.
Tim Kennedy. Who would do this? He wanted to show you just how outrageous waterboarding is, so he subjected himself to this. Watch.
U.S. Special Forces soldiers subjected himself to waterboarding to try and show that it's not a form of torture. Tim Kennedy posted a Facebook video of being mock drowned and then explained his main reason for doing it.
Imagine me having a tank.
Does this look like torture to you guys? It doesn't look like torture to me either.
The reason we're doing this, an amazing hero is running for, or has been appointed to be the director of the CIA.
Yeah, and that's why he did it. And quite honestly, there ought to be a discussion on it because certainly the Democratic Party, as well as Republicans at that time, had no problem with it. And quite honestly, extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. It's been true throughout history. We dropped an atomic bomb, for instance, that killed an awful lot of women and children. We attacked the civilian population because it was an extraordinary time, and our very livelihood, our very existence was considered at that time to be at stake. So we make these decisions. You know, today in America, the Democrats and the Republican Party, under Barack Obama, by the way, took the Patriot Act, which is, I think, completely unconstitutional and goes after our privacy. But in America today, they think waterboarding, the water into the face, is extraordinary. But do you know it is now legal in the United States for a FISA court or a secret judge somewhere to take you out of your home with no due process? That's legal in the United States. Democrats and Republicans voted on that. And they can also kill you. No judge, no jury, no due process. If the secret room, a bunch of guys get together, and gals, and say, I think he's a threat, they can take you out. That's the country you live in addition to putting spies in political campaigns. Is this the progressive era you want to live in? I hope not. But we can do something about it. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. We'll be back at 3 p.m. Please tell everyone you know. Have yourself a great Tuesday. See you then.
Yes, the entire known media universe is buzzing about the following amazing radio phenomenon.
It's the Bill LeMay. It's the Bill LeMay. It's the Bill LeMay Show.